Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something really significant happening in India.
We are. It's the recent approval to include caste data in the next population census.
Exactly. And this isn't just, counting heads. It has huge implications for governance, for policy, and, well, politics too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big one.
And especially for those of you preparing for your UPSC exams, getting your head around this is, frankly, critical. For mains, even prelims.
Definitely relevant across the board.
So for this deep dive, we've looked closely at recent reports from the Hindu and the Indian Express.
Good sources for this, yeah.
Our mission today, to really unpack this decision, look at the history, what's new this time, and what it might mean down the line. For your understanding, of course.
Okay, let's get into it.
So this approval came from the Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs, but the census itself has been delayed, right?
That's right. The 2021 census, it got pushed back because of COVID-19. Still postponed, actually. So this approval now adds another layer. People are really watching. When will it happen? And what exactly will it cover now with this caste data inclusion?
Right. And like you said, it's significant because this whole idea of counting caste in the census, it's not new, is it? It's been debated for a long time.
A very long time. This decision really brings that whole debate back to the forefront.
So maybe before we dig deeper into the caste aspect, we should just quickly touch on the census itself in India. Why is it so important? What's its main job?
Well, the census is fundamental, really. It gives us the baseline statistics on everything. Population, demographics, culture, economy. Right down to the village level.
So the raw data for planning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That data is absolutely essential for making informed policy decisions, figuring out how to allocate resources, understanding how society is changing. It's the bedrock.
And it has a long history in India, doesn't it? Even before 1946.
Yes. The first attempt was back in 1872, though it wasn't synchronous, not done everywhere at the same time. The first proper synchronous nationwide census was in 1881 under British rule. W.C. Plowden was the census commissioner then.
Right, and since then it's been every 10 years.
Every 10 years, yeah. Conducted by the Office of the Registrar General and Census Commissioner, which falls under the Ministry of Home Affairs.
And I assume there's a solid legal basis for this massive exercise.
Absolutely. Conducting the census is a union subject. It's listed in the Constitution, entry 69 of the Union List in the 7th Schedule.
Meaning the central government has the power.
Precisely. And the whole process is governed by the Census Act of 1948. That law provides the framework, mandates participation, ensures the data is official.
Okay, that sets the stage nicely. Now back to the history of counting caste within the census. You mentioned it's an old debate. What did it look like historically?
Well, interestingly, during the British era, from that first synchronous census in 1881 right up until 1931, they did collect detailed caste data.
They did, so it was standard practice then.
It was, yeah. Part of how they understood the population. But after independence in 1947, that practice largely stopped.
Why the change?
Multiple reasons, really.
Yeah.
Tied into the thinking of the new nation, perhaps wanting to move away from those colonial-era divisions. So from 1951 onwards, the main census only collected data specifically on scheduled castes, the SCs, and scheduled tribes, STs.
I see. But what about OBCs, other backward classes?
Well, back then, there weren't central reservations for OBCs like there are now. But in 1961, the central government actually suggested that states could conduct their own surveys for OBCs if they needed the data.
So the door wasn't completely shut at the state level?
Not entirely. And there's also the Collection of Statistics Act from 2008, which does allow states and local bodies to collect various kinds of data.
And we've seen states do that recently, haven't we? Like Bihar.
Exactly. Bihar in 2023 and Karnataka did one back in 2015. Those were state-level initiatives, though.
Right, but wasn't there a national attempt more recently? The SECC?
Yes, the Socio-Economic and Caste Census, the SECC. In 2011, that was the last big national effort to gather caste data alongside socioeconomic information.
How did that one pan out? Was it successful?
Well, it was ambitious. The Ministry of Rural Development handled the rural part, and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation did the urban areas. They collected a huge amount of information.
But did we get the caste data from it?
That's the thing. The socioeconomic data was published back in 2016, but the specific caste data collected during the SECC, it was withheld.
Withheld? Why? What happened?
The raw caste data was passed to the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. They set up an expert group, chaired by Arvind Panagaria, to look into classifying it.
Yeah.
Well, it's not clear if that group ever submitted a final report, and certainly nothing was made public. So that caste data from 2011 essentially remains unused, in limbo.
Wow. Seems like a massive effort with, well, limited results on the caste front. Did we learn anything useful from that whole SECC process, though? Anything that might help this time?
Oh, definitely. Some very important, if difficult, lessons. One huge issue was the way caste names were recorded. It was an open-ended question.
Meaning people could just write anything.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And enumerators ended up recording something like 46 lakh different caste names. 46 lakh.
That's incredible. Compared to what?
Compared to the 1931 census, which identified around 4,147 castes.
So what caused that explosion in numbers?
It seems people listed subcastes, gotras, even surnames like Gupta or Agarwal, which aren't really castes in the same way. It just created this massive, unwieldy data set.
Okay, so data quality was a major hurdle.
A huge hurdle. It showed how tricky it is to capture something as fluid and localized as caste identity in a standardized national survey. That's a key lesson.
Which brings us to the upcoming census and how they plan to handle caste this time. They must be trying to avoid those SECC issues. What's the plan?
They are. A major change is technology. This will be the first census done primarily digitally using a mobile app.
Okay, that's a big shift.
Huge. And specifically for caste, besides the usual SC and ST columns, there will be a new column, probably labeled Other. And crucially, it won't be open-ended.
Ah, so no free text entry.
No. Instead, there'll be a drop-down menu with a predefined list of castes and codes, a caste code directory.
Right, that sounds much more structured. How did they build this directory? Where did the codes come from?
It's been a complex task, I imagine. They're basically merging the existing central list, the central OBC list, which has about 2,650 communities.
Okay.
The SC list, around 1,170, the ST list, about 890, and then integrating them with the various state-level OBC lists, too.
Wow, trying to create one master list for the whole country.
That's the goal. A comprehensive national code book for enumerators to use. They're testing the software now, and there's a plan for a pre-test phase to iron out any kinks.
So this really is, as the sources say, a major policy shift. First time since 1931 for a comprehensive central caste count apart from SCSTs.
Exactly. Decades where this kind of data wasn't systematically collected at the national level, barring SCST figures. Remember, 1931 was the last published full caste census. There was data collected in 1941, but it wasn't published.
Which means for years, policy decisions, reservation quotas, political calculations, they've often relied on estimates.
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
Like the Mandel Commission's estimate that OBCs make up 52% of the population. That figure comes from way back and has been debated, but it's been influential because of the lack of concrete, updated census data.
Relying on estimates for such critical things, it seems, well, less than ideal.
It certainly introduces uncertainty. Having actual data could potentially change a lot of calculations.
But collecting this data isn't going to be simple, is it? What are the main challenges they might face this time, even with the directory?
Oh, there will definitely be challenges. Bureaucratic hurdles, for sure, but also data classification issues. Even with a directory, you have overlapping caste names between regions or ambiguities. Then there's the issue of people with intercaste backgrounds, or migrants whose reported caste might differ from their origin states list. And the state OBC lists themselves aren't consistent. Some states have subcategories like most backward classes. How do you map all that neatly onto a single national code?
Right. It's not just counting, it's classifying, and that sounds incredibly complex.
It is. And this whole exercise, as our sources point out, it really renews the debate. How should this data actually be used? For governance, for social justice, for political representation?
Big questions. So what are the immediate next steps then? What has to happen before the census can roll out?
Well, a massive training effort is needed. Something like 30 lakh government officials will need retraining to use the new digital system, the mobile app, and that caste directory effectively.
30 lakh people, that's enormous.
It is. And then there's the census process itself. It happens in two phases. Phase 1 is the house listing and housing schedule that has 31 questions. That part was actually notified back in 2020 before the big delays.
Okay, and phase 2?
Phase 2 is the main population count, the enumeration. That involves 28 questions. It was tested in 2019, but the official notification for Phase 2 hasn't happened yet, mainly due to the pandemic postponement.
Got it. And finally, the impact. Our sources really stress the connection between this census data and two other major developments: delimitation and women's reservation.
Absolutely critical links. The census results are essential for delimitation. the process of redrawing the boundaries of Lok Sabha constituencies based on population changes.
Which hasn't happened for a long time.
No, the current boundaries are based on older census data. New data is needed for that. And similarly, the implementation of the 33% reservation for women in parliament and state assemblies is legally tied to the next census and the subsequent delimitation exercise.
So this census, with the caste data, becomes the foundation for those potentially transformative changes.
Precisely. Accurate, up-to-date population data, including these demographic details, is needed to ensure those processes are fair and representative.
This has been really illuminating, a complex topic, but so important, especially, again, for anyone tracking developments relevant to the UPSC exams. If we had to boil it down, what are the key takeaways listeners should hold on to?
Okay, key takeaways. First, the sheer significance of bringing back a comprehensive caste count after such a long gap, since 1931, essentially. Second, the big shift to digital methods and, crucially, that standardized caste code directory trying to learn from past issues.
Right.
Third, remembering the history why caste counting stopped post-independence, mostly, and the challenges faced by the SECC 2011. Fourth, understanding the potential impact. How this data could influence everything from policy and resource allocation to political representation, particularly linking it to delimitation and women's reservation. That connection is vital for your mains prep, thinking about governance and social justice.
And even for prelims, just knowing the facts around the census and this change.
Definitely. Foundational knowledge.
So this deep dive gives you a solid overview. For you, our listener, particularly if you're on that UPSC journey, we really encourage you to think about this. How might this granular data reshape our understanding of Indian society? How could it drive future policy? Consider its direct links to syllabus topics like social justice, governance, electoral reforms.
What questions does it raise for you?
Exactly. Let us know. We encourage you to like this, subscribe if you haven't, and definitely leave your comments or queries below. We do read them and value your engagement.
We do.
And just a final reminder, our discussion today drew heavily from the excellent reporting in the Hindu and the Indian Express.
Great resources to follow on this.
Thank you so much for joining us on this important deep dive.